How to identify stakeholders in project management. Well, that is a really important question, but it's also one that is probably less process related than you might think. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover some very basics about how you go about identifying stakeholders in any project environment that you're in. And don't be too surprised if some of these things you're already doing, but you might not have formalized the process. That means that it's entirely possible that you don't do them as reliably as you could either. So let's try and make sure that we get consistent practices in place by using the same process over and over again. Early on in my career, I learned something very important. The most troublesome stakeholder might be, somewhat as a surprise to you, not anybody you've identified at all. And that, in fact, is one of the problems. You didn't identify them, which means you also didn't build much of a relationship with them. And as you know from the Enlightened Triple Constraints that we use as a model here in the Leadership Driven Project Management Academy, the relationships that you have with any of your stakeholders is truly the basis for everything that's going to make your project a success. So not identifying them? Well, let's just say that there was a meeting room that I was in, and I remember at the time thinking to myself, I'm never doing that again. From now on, I'm going to take steps to make sure I've identified everybody. You actually can't. It's just virtually impossible. But what you can do is take steps that are going to make it a little bit easier for you to identify most of them. And that actually starts us out with a very important point. You see, there are actually things that you should do, but there are also a couple of things that you shouldn't do. First of all, don't make any assumptions that you know exactly who the stakeholders are, so you don't have to go through a stakeholder identification exercise. You not only want to go through it, but you want to make sure that you get your entire team involved in this exercise. After all, they might have some ideas about who else is concerned. And this gets to the heart of how you find who your stakeholders are. You have to answer this simple question. Who is it that's concerned with either the project's end deliverable or the process by which we're going to get there? And if they're concerned with either of those things, they're a stakeholder. And sometimes your teammates have some really good insights about who counts in that equation. So make sure that you make this a little bit of a team effort. Doesn't hurt that it's also not a bad team building exercise. So step one, get everybody involved as possible. Don't forget your sponsor, by the way. Your project sponsor is not only one of your biggest stakeholders, one of your most key stakeholders, but your project sponsor is also somebody who can give you some valuable insight into who else in the organization might be stakeholders. Then make sure you document this. We don't ask you to document stuff because we're interested in seeing if we can talk you into busy work. This is because you never know when it seemed like a good idea at the time syndrome will strike. In other words, we don't remember everything. So having it documented, a whole lot easier. Step number 3, validate. Sometimes we think that people are stakeholders when in point of fact, they're extremely neutral. They're so neutral, they don't even want to be kept informed about it. So identifying stakeholders means not just looking at individuals, but at communities that are key stakeholder communities. And then you get to go find the person who can be a reliable and trustworthy liaison or representative for that stakeholder community. It's not unusual for you to have such a long list of stakeholders after you've gone through a comprehensive identification that it can be a little bit daunting. But it's still important because if you think about it, the time that you invest in identifying these people, nailing down what their interests are, and making sure you understand whether they're with you or not so much, is nothing compared to the grief that will happen if you end up sitting in a boardroom like I did, thinking to yourself,
I will never forget to identify all stakeholders again. I will never forget to identify all stakeholders again. I will never, ever forget to identify all stakeholders again.
This is not scar tissue you really need. And take it from me, there is an easier way to learn how to do it. You know, leadership-driven project management is all about how the relationships and expectations of your stakeholders are going to affect your team, your project, and ultimately your project success. So these lessons are geared towards really quick things that you can do immediately. And we want to make sure that we give you things that are actionable without any further description or explanation from us. But if in fact you find that you have some questions, please don't hesitate to give us a holler. If you like what we said and you have something to add, wonderful. Please put it in the comments. And please subscribe so that you are notified when new videos drop, because we release on a pretty regular basis. I'm Kimi Hirotsu Zimski, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for joining us.